This weekend on the Rochester Press Box from Salvatore's Pizzeria at the Garage Door Restaurant.
My name is Josh Rife, head coach of the Rochester Lancers, and I'm going to talk to you guys about real heroes today.
My name's Toby, Motyka, and I'll tell you why Frontier Field might be a nightly destination for you this summer.
I'm Mike Catalana. Jim Boeheim's not wrong often, but he was this time, and he should admit it.
And I'm Bill Pucko, Safe Journeys, Egon Spengler. Join us in the Press Box from the Salvatore's Pizzeria at the Garage Door Restaurant this week. The Rochester Press Box is brought to you by Salvatore's at the Garage Door, Rochester's choice winner for Best Pizzeria, featuring Wacky Wing Wednesday and the Super Slice. It's as big as your head. The games are always on at the Garage Door, home to the Rochester Press Box. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Rochester Press Box here from Salvatore's Pizzeria at the Garage Door Restaurant on East Ridge Road. I'm Bill Pucko, joined by Toby Motyka,
Happy to be back.
Mike Catalana.
Happy to be back again.
All right, I want to make sure.
Yep.
And Josh Rife, the first-year head coach of the Rochester Lancers soccer team, and 34, the youngest coach in the history of the league. You feel a little older after this first season?
It's definitely aged me a little bit.
Alrighty, well look, the topic, everyone has been talking about Jim Boeheim's rant against Duke, where he came onto the court and went crazy in the last seconds of the basketball there. I'll start with you, Josh. Have you ever been in a position of, like, as a coach, of being on the verge of just losing it like that?
Unfortunately, yes. You know, I think as a coach, you always want to hope the game's just out of hand in your favor, and so you can just sit back and go in cruise control. But ironically, not too long ago, 2 weeks ago, same incident, similar circumstances where I picked up a caution, I guess, which would be the equivalent to a technical foul. I think I have to be careful how I say this here, but I think it was just a time that I needed to speak my piece and stand up for my team.
You're only a year away from having been an active player. Did you have to redraw the lines as what you can and can't do?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I mean, I think as a player, I always just focused on doing my job, which is to go out there and play. I think, things like officials and addressing those things, that's more for the coach, and you hope that in some ways, can you help manage, and, you don't ever think that you can maybe sway a call, but you never know. Maybe you bring up a point, or maybe you do something that at least puts something in the back of the referee's mind that says, okay, next time, they might see it a little different. It could work out in your favor.
All right, about Jim Boeheim, I know you're itching to go after this.
Well, I think he had every right to be upset, but I think Jim Boeheim's been around a long time to know, in that circumstance, get as mad as you want. If he'd have stayed towards the bench, freaked out, the ref would have come over. There's no technical foul, there's no double technical, and it doesn't end the game. What frustrated me is, while he is totally entitled to get mad and get upset, he cost his team a chance to come back in the game. There is no argument about that. It would have been a 2-point game with Duke inbounding the ball. His double technical, and he deserved it, and he deserved to be thrown out of the game, ended any chance of a comeback. And what frustrates me is the man on the other bench, Coach Krzyzewski, if he'd have done the same thing, which I don't think he would have apologized and apologized afterward and said to his team, I cost you a chance to come back in the game. Because we just saw the NC State game where they threw the ball away with no timeouts left late in the game. There are plenty of circumstances where that could change. He was wrong. If one of his players did it, he would have exploded on his player. Instead, he did it, and I wish he would have owned up to that portion of it.
Is there anything you liked about it?
No. Put it this way, I can't put myself in a coach's shoes here. I would imagine, maybe if I was in that situation, I might have flipped out. Maybe not to that extent in that situation. Jim's been doing this long enough to know better, to hold back a little bit. Almost 40 years in that chair. You gotta know when to rein it in a little bit. The issue I have, more than the blow up, is the fact that he's pretending like the game was over anyways. Duke was 7 of 17 at the foul line, and was it a 1-and-1 coming if they managed to inbound the ball? They still had to hit the first free throw just to make it a 3-point game and not give Syracuse the ball back with 10 seconds left. That's 6 more seconds than Tyler Ennis had to hit a 40-foot shot against Pitt. To pretend the game was over, that's nonsense to me. They absolutely had a chance to win the game if he holds his cool.
I'd take the immature position of this whole thing.
Yeah.
I enjoyed seeing it. I said, I like the fact that Boeheim is still invested in the game.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. He should be invested in the game. He's getting paid a fortune. He's a Hall of Fame coach,
Yeah.
and he's trying to lead these guys to a championship. I say this never happens, and it's 2-3 years from now, and Mike Hopkins is the coach, and Mike Hopkins does that. You know what most Syracuse fans say? Jim Boeheim never would have done that to his team at the end of the game. They justify everything he does as a coach. And my point is, sometimes he's wrong. This time he was wrong. I wish he would have admitted it.
But Mookie McCroskey, who played for the Razor Sharks and played under
Right.
Jim Boeheim, said, they felt off what they know about Jim, so that's entirely within his character.
In the context of a practice or something close. We've all watched him publicly all these years. He's never done that, and he cost him at the end of the game.
Coach, is there anything to like about it, what he did out there?
I go a little bit. I like the spirit. I like the fight. For me as a coach, you try to obviously balance. I think like we talked about game situation and what's going on. I looked at, I graduated from Indiana University, obviously the general there, and he has his infamous blow-ups. And so, I think that there are, I hate to say it, but I'm sure that there are times when, tactically speaking, motivationally speaking, it might be the right time. But I would then maybe probably say as a coach, the responsibility lies on you to discern when and when is not that time, and obviously wasn't the right time.
All righty. Lance's coach Josh Rife is with us. Glad to have you, and we'll be back. Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box here from Salvatore's Pizzeria at the historic Garage Door Restaurant, East Ridge Road in Irondequoit. Bill with Toby, Mike, and Josh Rife, the head coach of the Rochester Lancers. Michael, you've been to the NFL Combines.
Yes.
It seems like they go through the same drill, and they do actually, the same drills every year. Keep making the same mistakes every year. What do you pull out of it this season?
When Toby and I went last year to the Combine, and I got my eyes opened up to it, what's really important at the Combine? I think in terms of what we see on the NFL Network, which is the sprints, and you see the workouts and all that kind of stuff, is great. And I think when a guy like Clowney runs a 4.5 40, it's absurd. But everybody knows he's a great athlete. But I think what we found out, and what I think most people miss, is all the other stuff that goes on at the Combine. The doctors getting a chance to really look at the players. The teams getting a chance to interview those players and to really kind of get to know them a little bit, or attempt to. They still make mistakes. They still pick the wrong guy, as we see all the time. But I think that's more important. Yeah, the flashy part of it, we get to see them run the sprints or do that, and everybody focuses on that. But I think teams and players move a lot based on the other stuff that no one sees at the Combine.
Yeah, the league does a lot of PR stuff. Are they doing this for us now, do you think, as much as the scouts?
Money, too. This thing's on TV constantly. I mean, how many hours can I watch a guy run 40 yards and bench press weights? I wouldn't do that if it wasn't the NFL, but it is, and they know to capitalize on this. But Mike's right on the money here. What we learn at the Combine about physicality is how many times you can bench press about 225 pounds and how fast you can run in a non-game environment. We know a lot of guys how they can play, but we want to know how they speak, how they interact with these front office types, how they interact with each other and other coaches in this high-pressure environment. I think that's why E.J. Manuel shot up the Bills draft board last year. He had a great interview, opened up their eyes to him a little bit, and they thought of him as a guy they wanted to lead the team.
And maybe that causes problems, too, because you let a guy talk his way up the draft board instead of playing his way there.
Coach, in a control situation like this, and I mean that soccer has done them too, can you make honest evaluations on players in these kind of surroundings?
I think like what you see in the Combine is that we're talking about there are certain technical aspects of somebody that you can recreate, but it's not necessarily game realistic. So there are certain things that you can ascertain from someone doing some of these technical things, but does it necessarily always translate into a game scenario? No. And would I probably take someone at face value just at a Combine? Probably not. I still know that it's kind of a crapshoot to a certain degree, and I'm trying to make the best educated guess.
With your eye on players, what do you look for most? What's the kind of thing you try to find in a player?
What you try to find, obviously there's the technical ability. Can they do the little things? And I think especially in today's society, and so much precedence gets put on the flash, and it's such a media overhyped, stimulus environment that people just want the highlight reel, and they don't really take time to evaluate just the basics and the fundamentals. I was very fortunate. I played 19 professional seasons, and it wasn't because I was the biggest, strongest, fastest, or but I tried to pay attention to detail and tried to take care of those little things.
All righty. Like it or not, when we return. Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box here from Salvatore's Pizzeria at the Garage Door Restaurant. Rochester Lancers have one game left to play this year. If you want to see them, you can see them Sunday afternoon. They play in Syracuse to wrap up their third year in the MISL. Just quickly, evaluate the season. What do you think?
You know, a lot of positive to be learned. You know, we had 2 guys who had great seasons last year. A lot of injuries, which I think have slowed down a lot of guys on our team. But it's been a great year of maturity for some of our younger guys to come alongside. And that was something we knew that you could have 2 great players, and you want to have as many great players as you can. But there's also got to be a supporting cast around them to help them. And I think that there's been a lot of growth, in that area as far as our supporting cast go.
And you'll be back next year.
That's the plan.
Excellent. All right, like it or not. Where did all the players in the NBA go? The quality of play in the NBA.
They all went to 5-6 teams, the big threes. That became the trend when LeBron hightailed it to Miami and Chris Bosh went with him. And it consolidated NBA dynasties, so to speak, and consolidated the talent. Now, the NBA has always been a sport where dynasties are more prevalent than maybe in any other sport because those individuals can just take over. The Lakers, the Bulls, the Celtics, those teams. But I think it's also a problem with the emphasis on individuals coming up. AAU basketball, the one and dones in college. These players don't play with teams long enough before suddenly they're in the spotlight in the NBA and trying to take it over themselves. And I think that's part of the reason you're seeing fewer guys actually star in the NBA and more of a consolidation in a couple of places.
It is. I mean, the NBA is riding a crest of popularity, but it's kind of crumbling at the foundation.
Well, it's a perfect storm of things to make this mess that it is this year. You have LeBron and you have those few teams that are superior. You have teams that were average to poor, like, say, the Boston Celtics or the Sixers or those teams that were playoff teams 2 years ago. They were in the, right on the edge of the Eastern Finals, or Boston did make it, and now they've made those deals. And you have a draft coming up next year that is one of the best we've seen in years. So there is an incentive for teams to be really bad, and there's an incentive for the other teams that are in the run to try to make a run at the Heat to still be there. So you have big separation between the haves and the have-nots. It's not good for the league because there are 10 to 15 cities now that are losing interest. General fans will watch and it'll go up in the playoffs, but you can't have so many teams so bad in the league. I think it's going to change rapidly within the next 2 years, but I think they need to do some things also to avoid the circumstance of the tanking and the losing that way, because I think it's bad for the
What's
game.
your theory?
I look at it and I think, when you have these young players coming out and they're not spending enough time just maturing, you look at like March Madness is coming up, and, my wife, she's a big basketball fan. We always laugh about this, that, there's so much, in Vegas, so much money exchanging hands on an 18-year-old making the right decision in a critical time. So you have these kids who are only spending a year, maybe 2 years, and they're not really maturing, and all of a sudden they're in the NBA, and now we're expecting them, just because they're in the NBA, to now continue to make the right decisions. Well, it doesn't translate, and I think what happens is you see poor basketball because you're asking kids to make the right decision in critical times, and now you're not just talking about your school pride, but now your career, there's money on the line, and, financially, if I do well, if I don't do well, it's a lot of pressure for people to make the right decision.
Josh, like it or not, Dale Earnhardt won the Daytona 500.
I like it. Go Junior. Come on. I spent 10 years down playing in Charlotte, which is right in the middle of NASCAR country. Went to a race, and that's where I really became a fan. And so, I think it's good for the sport. Obviously, he's got a lot of popularity, and people really love him. And so for him to do well, especially there at Daytona, considering what happened with his father there, I think it's, for NASCAR, it's the perfect story. It's great. They can eat it up.
Why do we like Dale Earnhardt so much?
I think people loved his father, and I think he seems as much like a regular guy as anybody on there. He could be a jerk. I don't know if he is. He doesn't come across that way. Yeah. He comes across more like, and I think it is a little bit of, fans, especially big fans of the sport, really miss his father. And he's the son, and I think people have kind of rooted for him. Sometimes people go against that, but I think with him they've gone for it. The shame of it for that race is that, of course, delayed, and it ended up at night. But we talk about the popularity of the NBA, which has been pretty good. The rain delay on NASCAR for the Daytona outdrew the NBA that afternoon. That's how many loyal fans hung in there for that race.
Boy, and the NBA gets decent numbers, too.
Yeah.
Mike, like it or not, the Bud Carpenter issue with the Buffalo Bills.
It's really interesting to me, and I like the sense of new guys versus old guys a little bit. I think this franchise has needed that. I think they needed that.
The confrontation?
Grenade absolutely dropped in there. Nothing against Bud Carpenter personally, but it's a rare thing when a trainer or a strength guy stays with a franchise that long. That is a key component of a team. Usually the coach makes that call. And if not in the first year, in the second year. And I don't know if Doug Marrone has anything personal with Bud Carpenter, if that's where the rift is, but I kind of like it. I want to see this friction a little bit to bust this franchise out. Not that Bud Carpenter loses his job. He's been very good at his job for a long time. But the the way it's been going isn't working, and they need some help.
I like that the new regime isn't just sitting back and resting on the laurels. I don't like that the old regime is seemingly being resistant to it.
Yeah.
I wish that there was a little more push, and they were willing to give a little bit.
Yeah, it's so funny. I just think Bud Carpenter is in the middle of this. He says, "What did I do?"
Yeah. And again, it could be, sometimes it is just change for change's sake. And Bud's done a great job, but the new coach usually gets his own guy.
All right, unfinished business when we return. Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box here from Salvatore's at the Garage Door Restaurant, Wacky Wings Wednesday, and live music every Friday night here. Unfinished business, Toby.
I'm going to talk about baseball a little bit. I know this is Yankee country, but we also love our Rochester Red Wings here. And they were bad for a long time before Gene Glynn came to town as the manager, and he seems to have righted the ship. Well, this is possibly the year that the Rochester Red Wings actually turn back into the true contender for a championship in AAA baseball. The Minnesota Twins actually have managed to build the #1 farm system in the major leagues. Now, that's not just AAA. That can go all the way down to low A ball, high A ball, and AA. But some names to keep an eye on: Alex Meyer, Miguel Sano, Byron Buxton. These are all world prospects that very well could be starting or making an extended stop in Rochester this season. It's going to be a good year for baseball here, and I hope people continue to go out to the ballpark to watch this team play.
I'm trying to think, to a lesser extent, when Morno was coming up, it was some of that, but I take it all the way back to my first year in Rochester. I saw the '81 season, and Cal Ripken was coming up. Spent the year in Rochester, and everyone knew he was going to be a star. A lot of anticipation.
These are prospects on the level of supposedly Mike Trout and Miguel Cabrera. They're going to be fun to watch.
So baseball, the Baseball America listed those first two guys you said, 1 and 6 in all of baseball coming into this season.
Yeah.
Josh, what do you got?
Well, I'd like to give a little shout out to our troops with this one here. I love, obviously in the news today, defense cuts have been one of these things, and I'm not here to make a stance about that, but I think it's just a reminder of what they do for us. And I love that the comment by TJ Soji, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, during the Olympics asked about being a hero, and he said, the real heroes are the guys who are wearing the uniforms to protect our country. And so I think that's, obviously with what's going on in the news today, just a great reminder of what they do for us. And so just a thanks and a shout out to all the troops out there. Thank you.
We misuse the word hero an awful lot in this country, I think, especially in sports.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's still a game. As much as we cover it and we want to talk about it, what we do, at least what I do and what my players do, it's still a game, and there's not life and death on the line for that, and we do it for entertainment, and we hope people enjoy it. But.
Very good. Mike?
I want to talk about a situation brewing down in New Orleans with Jimmy Graham. Now, if you're not familiar with this, Jimmy Graham, most people know him especially if you play fantasy football, he is a superior player at his position. Now, what is his position? Well, we all think of him as a tight end because that's what he's listed at. The truth is, he lined up as wide receiver about 70% of the time last year. And here is where the fight is happening. The Saints want to put the franchise tag, or feel they may need to, on him as a tight end. He would like to be listed as a wide receiver. There's about a $4 million a year gap between those two. There are some in the NFL who believe that this great player could end up becoming an unrestricted free agent if this happens, because these teams can't come together and the NFL has to step in, and he ends up going on the open market. And I'm going to tell you this, if he goes out on the open market, a guy like Jimmy Graham could end up getting about $50 million guaranteed, or about the same thing slap hitter 260 guy for the Yankees, Mr. Gardner, is getting. That just tells you a little bit of the difference between baseball and what's supposed to be America's #1 sport, the NFL.
Graham is sort of a one-of-a-kind guy, but if he gets his way here, this is going to change everything.
Well, because he really does, as a position player, play wide receiver. They list him as a tight end. He's out there split outside a lot, and when he plays, he's dominant. But Brett Gardner got $50 million. We can give it to Jimmy Graham, too.
Well, sports and movies are the cornerstones, I think, of American popular culture. And in that regard, we lost a giant this week when Harold Ramis passed at the age of 69. Whether, we think of Harold Ramis as Egon Spengler, mostly in the Ghostbusters, but when you look at his resume, he was involved in things like Animal House, Caddyshack, Groundhog Day, the Vacation series.
Stripes.
Almost all of Bill Murray's great movies. Even Knocked Up is something a little more recently. Just great movies. And another baseball movie, maybe close to your heart. Do you ever see Stealing Home?
No.
Stealing Home was set in Philadelphia. It stars Mark Harmon and Jodie Foster. It's sort of a sports-based movie. So anyway, he likes sports. He was a lifetime Chicago Cubs fan. He was an amateur fencer. So we wish a safe journey and a thank you to Egon Spengler. We record the Rochester Press Box here from Salvatore's at the Garage Door Restaurant every Wednesday at 12:30. We invite you to come down, watch the show, have a little lunch with us. Guys, thanks as always. Toby, Mike, Josh, pleasure. We'll do it again.
Thanks for having me.
Josh Rife, the head coach of the Rochester Lancers. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on the Press Box.